What if you spent an entire career looking for answers, only to discover that so many of the good ones were right next door? Well, that's exactly what happened to David von Drehle in Post. But it was his 109-year-old neighbor, Charlie, who ended up teaching him more about life than almost any other story he's written. So he decided to write a book about his conversations with Charlie. It's called The Book of Charlie. So I sat down with David to learn what he learned from Charlie and how we can all live a resilient and truly happy life. This is A Bit of Optimism. For those who are tuning in, Charlie, who you wrote about in A Book of Charlie, was your neighbor.
And Charlie had just celebrated his 102nd birthday the week before.
Unbelievable.
I took in that scene and I said to myself, this is somebody I need to get to know.
So longevity is a subject now. And the big commentators on the subject, they're obsessive about diet. They're obsessive about exercise. They're biohacking. Sleep is now a common topic. Charlie, who empirically has more to say on longevity than anybody else who's studying at the age of 40, did Charlie obey all of these things that all of these books are telling us to obey? Like, what did you learn about what it takes to live a long and happy life?
Charlie obeyed precisely 0 of those that you listed. People would ask him, what's the secret to a long life? And as a physician, he would say, secret to a long life is good luck. The idea that this was somehow something you control or hack or figure out, as a doctor, he completely rejected that.
Having talked to some of these people who are into this, they've got all the exercise and nutrition figured out, but I was astonished how some of them aren't happy people. And the people who, I mean, the way you talk about Charlie, he was a happy man.
Yes. What I figured out from Charlie and what I want to share with my kids, that's really the reason I wrote the Book of Charlie, was to pass on some of these lessons to my kids or make an argument for them, is that happiness is very much a thing we choose. Charlie, despite a lot of tragedy, setbacks, and very difficult situations, he chose to be happy. The story he assembled for himself about his life, choosing between the bright spots and the dark spots, he chose to tell a narrative of happiness. And I think it made him a happier person.
What specifically did you want to take from Charlie that you wanted to give to your kids?
Charlie embodied the philosophy of Stoicism. The philosophy of Stoicism teaches that there's a lot in our lives that we don't control. We don't control other people. I don't control where you're going to go in this conversation, just as you don't control where I'm going to go. We don't control flukes of fate or fortune. What we do control, though, is the product of our own thinking, our own intention, our own will is the word that the classical philosophers used. We can decide what we're going to do with the time that we have, or try to do with the time that we have on earth, and how we're going to perceive the events of our lives. Are we going to look for the best in other people? Are we going to look for the worst in other people? These are our choices. So,
what was it about your world perspective that Charlie challenged?
You know, I say in the book that I advance this theory of mine that as young people, we are complexifiers. We take this simple world of childhood and we discover all the complexity to it. And people are not as nice as they seemed, and the world is not as easy or as just or as kind as we thought or were told in the nursery. If you live long enough, you can turn into a simplifier again. And what you do is you realize that, yeah, the world's complicated, but what you do about it is pretty simple. You know, practice kindness, practice generosity, spread joy, enjoy the wonder of beauty of the world. All these simple things that sound like Facebook memes or greeting cards. But the reason that they're so familiar, we discover, and Charlie helped remind me, the reason they're so familiar is because they're true. Charlie not only said to do it, he lived it. He would have rejected the idea that he even had a philosophy, but he was a walking, living philosophy lesson. You know, this works. You look at the guy, he's a happy man.
Weeks. And as I'm listening to you, you know, it's like we can't all necessarily live like Charlie all the time. But the idea that we can, you know, have a gratitude practice in the morning, even if it's only for a month or two and then it falls away, and then maybe 6 months later we bring it back, like that's okay. And I think you said it, right? Because there's nothing particularly new about what Charlie said. The Stoics talked about things that Charlie said. Viktor Frankl wrote about, it's our point of view, it's our attitude to the world that we can control if we can't control the circumstances. And you're telling it in a new way through the eyes of Charlie. But I think the reality is it's just a reminder to go do the things that we all know that we have to do. But to your point, we don't do them and then feel bad about not doing them. And the answer is do it when you think about it. And if you forget, then you forget, and do it again the next time you think about it.
Another way to frame up this thing is the sort of Zen concept, which I think you're driving to, which is so essential. And that is, we live in the present. There's a lot of talk about, and it's true, that we've got an epidemic of depression and anxiety in our contemporary society. Well, what's depression really, except regret about things in the past? And what's anxiety really, except fear of things in the future? Well, we can't touch the past. We can't touch the future, which is why those emotions are so frustrating. What we can do is live in the present moment.
I believe that life is balanced, right? For everything that we get in life, it comes at a cost. And for everything that we struggle with, there's opportunity within that struggle. And it's always balanced. The greater the struggle, the greater the opportunity, the greater the benefits, the greater the cost, always.
Do the next thing in any moment, even when you can't see the whole picture, even when you don't have the entire answer. Just figure out what's the next right thing to do and do that. The steps iterate, they build on each other. You learn from the thing that you did, the step you took, you learn for the next step, and you get through difficulty by going through it. There's no around, there's no over, there's no wishing away. You got to go through the thing. And you take these incremental steps and you iterate from each one of them. You learn from them so that your next step is better informed. And that's the way you make progress. You don't sit under a tree waiting for an apple to fall on your head. 5% of my best ideas come while I'm mowing the lawn. The reason the world's going to get better is because the human race is basically Charlie. He is an ordinary human being who figured out how to make his life useful and how to make the world around him a little bit better place. And when you add up all those efforts of all those Charlies, things basically go in the right direction. That's how thinking happens. And these were two key points in Charlie's one-page philosophy of life: ask forgiveness and forgive.